Across 3,000 years of Go history, millions of games have been played, but only a handful became legends. These are games that shook nations, defied AI, and carved names into eternity. Some were battles of honor, some of survival, and some of pure genius. Today, we're counting down the top 5 Go games in history. Let's begin. Game number 5. Shusaku vs. Genin Inseki, 1846. A 17-year-old teenager faces a powerful veteran in Edo period Japan. Midway through the match, Shusaku calmly drops a move in the center, sharp, quiet, and deadly. At that exact moment, Genin's ear visibly turns red. A doctor watching the game, who didn't even know how to play Go, noticed it and boldly bet that Genin would lose. Everyone laughed at him, but in the end, the doctor was right. That single moment gave this match its name, the ear-reddening game, the most legendary move in Go history, not because it was flashy, but because it was perfect for humans. In this game, Shusaku is playing as black and Genin Insei is playing as white. Last move, Shusaku Ataris over here, getting rid of white's third line stone and claiming the corner territory. At this point, we can tell that black has a lot of territory on the top right, the bottom left, as well as a small living group over here, plus the side on top. White also has territories. There's a live group over here. There's a lot of points, well, decent amount of points over here. There's a giant influence on the right that is very strong, actually, because it's white is all alive, and there's a lot of things to build on the left side. So the game at this point is slightly better for white. But it all depends on what white does. If this influence doesn't do anything, then at the end of the day, black's going to have more territory. Therefore, the next move, white plays the elephant eye, and this is threatening to cut the black 4 stones over here. Now, this is a great idea because we are using the influence to attack a weak group and to claim profit. This follows tightly with the principles of attack in a game of Go. Now, black cannot rush to connect because tactically there's no way for black to connect. If black pushes, white won't block here. Instead, white will just extend. When you push again, then I can block. And this will cause a serious problem for black. When black cuts, white ataris, black connects, and both players will start pushing. But the problem is, every single one of these exchanges is great for white because white is facing a bright side that he can build on, but black is facing a dead side where he's facing a giant wall. So all of these moves are absolutely gaining 0 points, as well as there's a very ugly shape. So black is super inefficient on top of that. So if the game plays out like this, white will definitely be leading by quite a lot. So that's when white plays the elephant eye in the actual game. One of the most famous Tetsujis of all time has been played, and that is called ear-reddening Tetsuji. That is to play this center move. It just looks very beautiful from a human's perspective. And when the move was played on the board, you can immediately tell it is a fantastic move. Not only it expands black on top, it also suppresses white's influence on the right. It's aiming at the invasion on the left, and it's also helping the 4 stones over here. So if white tries to kill black in a small way, let's say for example like this, then black doesn't even care because this is just not that many points. So black can now go ahead and invade, crawl into the corner, or just do something else that's more important than protecting the 4 stones over here. So this 1 stone just lights up the entire board, and it controls the board in all 4 different directions. It's definitely a very famous Tetsuji. And back then the story was there was a doctor who saw that after this move, Genin Insei had his ear red, it turns red, and then he betted on that. He betted that Shusaku was going to win the game because he realized that from the ear turning red for Genin Insei that he's in a very difficult situation, and therefore
even if he doesn't know much about Go, he'd still be like, okay, well, this guy is facing some trouble, so I'm gonna bet on his opponent. And at the end of the day, he won, so which is quite fascinating. So from today's perspective, what does AI say about this move? Well, the answer is that AI thought it was an okay move. It wouldn't be its first choice. What AI had in mind was that Black can crawl into the corner because this is an absolutely huge move to get the corner and reduce White's corner. So in terms of territory, this is absolutely giant. And the idea behind not doing anything in the center is because it doesn't have any concrete points. So if White still tries to capture like this, then Black doesn't really have to care. But if White tries to capture, let's say, big in the center, then later on, Black can still reduce White's territory with this small knight move. So this would be what AI is suggesting. But of course, we cannot analyze an ancient game played in 1846 with an AI. That would just be too much. So I still think, despite everything, this is definitely a very famous and very beautiful Tsuji for human players, especially from that time.
Game number 4. Nie Weiping versus Kobayashi Koichi, 1985. The very first China-Japan Go exchange match. A brand new tournament with national pride on the line. Win and stay. One loss and you're out. And China was down to its last player, Nie Weiping. Across the board sat Kobayashi Koichi, Japan's strongest Meijin, known for his cold, surgical endgame. The pressure was crushing. Nie Weiping had to breathe through an oxygen mask between moves. Millions of Chinese fans were watching this game. It wasn't just a game, it felt like a war. So this is the moment that we're talking about. This is probably the most important moment in the Chinese modern Go history. At this point, it's only Nie Weiping left in the Chinese team, and millions of Chinese fans, or even people who don't know how to play Go, were watching this moment. So Nie Weiping last move decided to protect the territory over here to make sure at least the territorial balance is still there. The problem with this move is that it's an overplay because it leaves the dragon in the center very vulnerable. Kobayashi decided to attach onto Black, and Nie Weiping felt that this moment was so difficult that he spent an hour thinking about the next move and reading out all the variations. And he knew that if he does not play the most resilient way, the game could end very quickly. Many years later, he was commenting on his own game, and what he said was that at this point, Black is done. I was done. And if White played correctly, this is game over for Black. But he still tried to find the most resilient sequence that would lead Kobayashi to make a mistake. So in his own commentary, he said that if Black honeys, White will bump into Black. Black has to connect because there's an Atari. And now White will extend, and therefore even if his dragon over here could escape, this would still be game over. And he didn't really explain the all the sequence that followed, but basically what he meant was that if Black pushes once again, White will block here, and then if Black connects the dragon safely home, White will push over here, and what he said is that this is the same as if the whole dragon was killed. Just losing this group is game over for Black as well. And extending up would lead to a similar result because there's still a cutting point. So it's more or less the same results. If Black honeys, White will push, Black cuts, and now White is going to push. When Black cuts through, White will cut with an Atari. And this is also game over because when Black captures, this is White's turn to play. And now White can fix the weakness over here and kill Black dragon inside. So that's a very easy sequence to read out that is obviously game over for Black. So this is why in the actual game, Nie Weiping decided to play the most complicated variation, that is to squeeze White stone over here. Kobayashi follows up with the push, Black Ataris, and white honeys on top. So at this point, there are many variations that lead to victory for white. For example, honey over here, after black gets his dragon save, we can just push and cut like this. This will also lead to a victory for white. And now, for example, if black doesn't want that to happen, then white can connect over here. And because of the stone over here, when you honey, white can just connect. And now, as we can see, black has a cutting point here, a cutting point over here, and another cutting point over here. So black is basically collapsing because his groups are just too weak. So that's one way of winning the game for white. What Kobayashi played in the actual game is also an excellent way to defeat black. Black Ataris, white has to connect. That's just a very irrelevant exchange. And black takes the stone in the center. And this is the moment where this is so important. And there's a lot of reading behind it. So here, if white just wedges here, this is game over for Niu Weiping, actually. But the reason Kobayashi did not wedge here is because Niu Weiping thought that he misread, and he was telling us what he misread. So, well, first of all, you can't Atari here, right? Because white can connect with an Atari, and of course that's not going to work for black. Black Atari is here, white connects, and Niu Weiping was saying that Kobayashi was very scared of this move. When white connects, black can counter here, and when white turns, black pushes, white connects, and now black pushes through here, and this would lead to so white Ataris, black connects, and as we can see, white cannot really get out, and this liberty fight doesn't really work because, well, first of all, I can Atari like this, right? So tactically it doesn't work at all. But more importantly, white only has 2 liberties. And of course, that would be game over for white, actually. So that's what Kobayashi was worried about. And therefore, you can see why in the actual game, he played the turn over here. That is hoping for black to play here. Then he can get this in Sente, forcing black to connect. Then he can wedge. And then he's not afraid of this anymore because of the exchange here. So when you push, white is just on time to get his group back, and therefore that's game over for black. But let's see why he should have wedged. So at this point, if white wedges, black plays here, white connects. When black plays the threatening move that threatens the cut, white has a Tsuji that is just to extend his liberty. And when black cuts, white can just go ahead and basically just start the liberty fight. And like this, black is short by 1 liberty, actually. And therefore, that is just a very clean kill for white. And that would have changed history. But unfortunately, in the actual game, white did not read this move out. And he thought the liberty fight was complicated. Maybe another variation that we suspect that this is what he was reading. The other variation he could be reading is when white plays the move over here that's trying to squeeze black's liberty, we can already tell that in terms of shape, this is not ideal. Black can attach over here when white connects. Black can now cut. And now, as we can see, white is also very short in terms of liberty. This variation would lead to a very complex ko, which Kobayashi did not really like. So I think those are the 2 main lines that Kobayashi was reading out, but he didn't really see the move. That is to play this shape move that is a bamboo shape. So I guess that's just sometimes that just happens to even to the best players. Sometimes there's a move that you just missed. Okay, so in the actual game, white missed the perfect opportunity to crush black in this game. And he played a turn on the second line. And of course, black realized that this is his chance to escape. And he played the shape move that is attached over here. Now, black plays the protecting move. Black squeeze white and then wedge. And now white Ataris from behind. Black connects. White Ataris. Black now connects. And white connects. Now, black cuts. This is
this is a very good move because white now doesn't have the time to really connect over here because he has to connect the main group first. Black extends, which is Sente, forcing white to connect. And then he goes back and captures the 3 white stones in the center. So the result of this is white was able to gain slightly in terms of endgame, but black was able to safely escape this dragon that was in trouble, but also doing so by capturing 3 stones in the center, which is pretty cool for black. So the game at this point is very close. Now, Kobayashi, as the best endgame player, of course, not going to miss big endgames like this. And here, black has to be extra careful. So if black just plays the turn over here, which is normally what we would have played, but this would lead to a very serious problem. White would peep into black's corner, is threatening to squeeze and connect, therefore black has to answer, but then white's Kusumi is coming, and this is a very nasty squeeze in the corner for black. So black can manage to capture white with a perfect play, but black will lose a lot of territory in doing so because all his points is squeezed. So that would have been a blunder. Instead, Nie Weiping has stayed very clear, so he played a very nice shape move. White attaches, black blocks, white connects, and then black plays a tiger's mouth. So the game keeps going from this point on. A very close game where each player made some endgame mistakes, but Kobayashi unfortunately happened to be the last the person who made the last mistake, and therefore he lost this game by 2.5 points. And Nie Weiping moved on to defeat the 2 remaining Japanese players after this victory as well, and therefore he was able to bring the victory back to China, and people named him the God of Go because of this. And he is definitely a legend in China.
Game number 3. AlphaGo versus Ke Jie, Game 2, 2017. What made this game unforgettable wasn't just the moves, it was the fight. Ke Jie didn't play like a man facing defeat. He played like a man fighting destiny. According to Fine Art, China's strongest AI, Ke Jie still had a 30% win rate over 100 moves in. That is unheard of against AlphaGo. It was the closest any human ever came to touching the untouchable. So I have talked about this game in details in one of my videos, and you can check it out. So here I just want to give a little bit extra information on top of that game because I don't feel like repeating myself in the commentary. So here, at this point, Ke Jie still has 30% win rate according to Fine Art of China. So I just want to briefly talk about the differences in AI. The AI you and I use is probably Lila or Lizzy, or maybe you have some of your own AI tools. So these AIs, they're not as strong as the Fine Art from China. And you have to be a top professional player in China to even get access to Fine Art. So not everybody can even get Fine Art. Even if you have money, even if you like some top officials, you cannot get Fine Art unless you are one of the top professional Go players in China. Okay, so my little analysis is based on what a professional said from his Fine Art. So here, this is where the turning point for the game was. So at this point, Ke Jie has 30% win rate, but after he decided to play the Atari in the actual game, the idea is to save his group on the bottom. That's a very human idea. But apparently this move is the wrong idea, and that just shows you how complicated the game of Go is. So when black extends, not only gains a lot of territory, but you feel like white is squeezed into a valley. But more importantly, this time bomb is very hard to trigger at this point because white doesn't have a lot of co-threats. White attaches, black honeys, and white plays the tiger's mouth. That's what happened in the actual game. Here, what Ke Jie should have played, according to Fine Art, and actually for curiosity, I ran with my own software, and they agreed on this, that is for white to play the tiger's mouth. But the follow-up is very unclear to me. So if I use my own software, it's saying, well, you should peep over here. When white extend, you should just answer. Of course, I personally don't understand anything about this variation. But apparently Fine Art is also saying, well, you can just like take the ko. That's what the variation that Fine Art gave. So different AI would have different views on this. But of course, we trust what fine art is saying. And since I don't have access to fine art, I can only watch a professional player from China. He was commenting on this. He basically just briefly mentioned that this is the only move that can reach more or less equality, because 30% is kind of considered equality for Ke Jie. That just shows you, look at how many moves we have played on the board. And Ke Jie was still able to maintain 30% win rate, which is very, very impressive. And this is why this game is so famous. So, but of course, from this point on, it's still going to be very difficult for white, of course, because you're playing against the machine and you don't really know what your win rates are. So in the actual game, Ke Jie still played a very fantastic game where he played Atari. And after this, there was a center fight breaking out. This is all covered in my video. And later on, I said there was another little opportunity for Ke Jie, but at this point, the win rate is already about 10% for Ke Jie. So by choosing this sequence, which looked very normal for human players, Ke Jie went from 30% to 10%, which is pretty brutal. But it's also, it just shows you the difference between human and AI is absolutely huge. We don't even know what went wrong, and our win rate dropped by 20%. So yeah, that's just a bit of extra information that I haven't covered in my full game analysis back when I was making the full video on this game. You can check it out if you're interested.
Game number 2, AlphaGo versus Lee Sedol. Game 4, 2016. 3 games, 3 losses. Humanity was being dismantled move by move. And then came Game 4. Lee Sedol sat down to fight not just a machine, but inevitability itself. Move after move, AlphaGo seemed invincible until move 78. A move so unexpected, so human, that it stunned the AI. They call it the divine move till this day, because for one moment, the impossible happened.
So we all know the very famous move 78, the divine move that made AlphaGo lose. Today I want to cover this move from a different angle. I want to show you why this move doesn't work tactically, because you might have heard that, oh, this move doesn't work tactically, it's not really working, but you don't really know why. But after watching today's section, we will show you why that is. So first of all, the idea for white is to create problems inside here, ideally to basically save all his stones or break this territory or cause some trouble. If white plays directly, white can attach here black blocks. We Atari, okay? These are all white Sente, but these are not enough to cause problems, because when white cuts, black Ataris, white pulls out, and black turns here, forcing white to connect, and then black can just capture white on time because he has 2 liberties. But imagine if white has a stone over here, then black is dead inside. So the whole idea of the divine move that Lee Sedol played at move 78 was to try to exchange moves such that he can secretly or silently got this move and then make AlphaGo collapse here. So AlphaGo was obviously aware of that tactical idea, but interestingly, he did not, like AlphaGo did not respond well locally. So at this point, it's still a very winning game for black if AlphaGo answered everything correctly. What AlphaGo actually played in the game is to extend over here, which made the game slightly complicated, but this extension actually works. But let's first look at 2 very clean variations for black that would refute this divine move. The first variation is for black to block on top, block like this. This is probably the cleanest variation that black can play. White has to pull the stone back, and now the Tetsuji for black to play is to extend. This is a little bit hard to think about, but if you read things out, this is the best move. So first of all, you cannot play the intuitive move. If you play intuitive move, you will be in trouble. White cuts, black Ataris, white pulls the stone out. Sure, you can save the 3 stones, but then when white Ataris and cuts, black is in trouble, because when you Atari and connect, white can just block over here, and I will leave you to verify that there's tactically no way for black to get out, and therefore that is game over for AlphaGo. So it's very important to read things correctly in a fight and just extend the stone out, because this is a great move because it allows black to be all connected and there's still no way for white to get out. For example, if white tries to cut, black can just connect. When white threatens this move, black can just cut in the center, and there's really not much that white can do over here either, and therefore this is probably the cleanest way for black to knock out white locally. So that's first option for black. The second option is for black to Atari like this. Now here the key for this solution is when white Ataris and attaches, this is a sente, but when white, very importantly, when white tried to get this crucial move that I was talking about, it's very important for black to give up this stone over here and just here, not only you have to give up the stone, but you have to play very, very correctly, because there's another weakness over here. White can also push through here, and therefore the tsuji that will absolutely defeat white over here is to connect. This move solidifies the group over here, but also makes this cutting point impossible. So when white captures, black can Atari. When you cut, I can just turn, and because this is an Atari, you have to save the stone. Black has the time to Atari and then Atari, making sure that his 3 stones are out. If white tries to live the group inside by cutting, black Ataris, white extends out, black first connect the center group, white Ataris, that's his rights, and then he turns on the bottom trying to live. Here, black has another very beautiful Tsuji to play the extension on the second line, making sure there's absolutely no Aji for his own group, and this move also just kills white because white doesn't have enough ice space. So this variation would also be a very clean way to defeat white over here. Now, let's look at what AlphaGo played in the actual game. AlphaGo played... Okay, at this wedge, AlphaGo played the extension over here. This made the game a lot more complicated. And AlphaGo chose the most chaotic variation. This still tactically works for black, but it's already getting a little difficult. Black blocks, that's correct move. White blocks, black Ataris, and now white cuts on top. Here, AlphaGo basically at this point just started to blunder. I'm pretty sure this is just like AlphaGo pretty much, I don't know what happened to the software, but basically it lost its mind, put in a understandable term, like basically, like AlphaGo was not able to calculate here. So if AlphaGo was able to calculate here, what AlphaGo would have played is to simply Atari here. So first we would fix the cutting point. Okay, so there's no more this Aji over here. Now, of course, white can do something against this group, and therefore he will throw in. We take Atari, forcing black to take, and then Atari from behind, causing a ko. Black connects and white takes. But here, black can jump the 4 stones out. Because of these exchanges, yeah, white got a lot, but also in the meantime, he hurt his own stones here. This group has very short liberties. And now when white connects, black can just play a double tapping move to make sure that these all killed. And this would also be a very big leading game for black as well. Sure, you broke the center, but I also broke your right side, and in the meantime, I captured a lot of territory. So this would also be a winning game for AlphaGo. Although this is already a little bit more complicated. But the miracle happened at this point because AlphaGo lost its mind and he decided to just play like these. And of course, these variations won't really confuse Lee Sedol. Lee Sedol answered very correctly and black's all dead. Black takes, and now white hanes, and of course black cannot connect because the reason we talked about, there's a very serious problem here. Black extends down, trying to cause a liberty fight over here. White takes, black peeps, and here Lee Sedol played very correctly by just capturing the group that only has 3 liberties. So if you cut, I keep squeezing, then I'm faster by 1 liberty. And at this point, very funny scene that also happened was that AlphaGo played a wedge over here, and I think Lee Sedol at the time was laughing at this move. And also the player on the outside, basically the guy helping AlphaGo to make the moves, was also shaking his head because he knew that this was such a bad and obviously bad move.
And at this point, you can tell this becomes hopeless for AlphaGo from this point, and we all know what happened next.
Game number 1. Go Seigen vs Honimbo Shusai, 1933. This game is called the Game of the Century. It has a Tsuji, called the Tsuji of the Century. It wasn't just a match, it was the moment the old world met the new. When the most talented young man, Go Seigen, challenged the great grandmaster of classical Go. And in the heart of the battle, two of the most brilliant Tsujis ever played happened back to back.
If you were to ask me what was the most famous game, at least of the last century, I would definitely tell you this is it. So the historical context is absolutely insane. Go Seigen was only 19 years old, playing as black against the best player in Japan at the time. His name is Honimbo Shusai. So at the time, Go was very different at the time. First of all, black doesn't pay komi. So basically, both players are just like, there's no compensation for white players at the time. So, of course, Go Seigen had a big advantage, right? If we can check with AI today, we know that this is a big advantage if you don't have to pay the komi. But because of some inaccuracies that Go Seigen has played, the game has come to a point that it is very close in terms of points at this point. Of course, Shusai had a lot of pressure on his shoulder as well because he was the best player in Japan and Go Seigen was only 19 years old. So getting defeated by a 19 years old player, it was not fun at the time, right? So these days it happens all the time and no one cares. But at the time, Japanese Go culture was very different. So many people were watching this game. It was always on the newspaper, and the Go culture at the time was just absolutely intense. So at this point, the game's super close, and therefore, of course, if Shusai makes any misstep, he could definitely lose the game because Go Seigen was a very strong player already. So he has to find some sort of move that gives him a safety margin. And here comes the Tsuji of the century, of the 20th century. That is for white to play this move over here. It's like in the middle of black's territory. It looks very dangerous, and there's a lot of calculations that you have to do before you can make a move like this. So against this move, if black simply blocks, it looks like white is dead inside. Well, there's some aji, and white will make use of it. He's going to push. Black is forced to cut. White ataris and black extend white ataris, and black turns here. Here, it's very important for white to directly cut. If you make this exchange, then everything would just be, this is not a Tsuji anymore if you play like this, because black can capture. There's a miai of connecting and making two eyes. So this won't work for white. So white has another follow-up Tsuji that is just cut directly. When black ataris, white can push with an atari. When black connects, we can now connect our the stone. And now black only has two liberties, and he has no choice but to save the group like this by capturing the two stones. While his bigger group is saved, what about the smaller group over here? Well, they're dead because we can capture, and then black is dead. And this transfer of territory is definitely game over for Go Seigen. So this variation does not work. I'm just showing the simplest variation. Of course, there are variations like what happens with this Kosumi. And there's a lot of reading that Shusai had to read out before he can play a move like this. Because of time constraint, I'm not going to show every single one of them. But what I find really impressive is what Go Seigen came up with. So normally when we encounter a Tsuji like this that works, normally for any players would be an instant collapse because it's in the middle of our territory and we have no way to defend it. It tactically works. So after exactly about like 1 hour of thinking, Go Seigen came up with the best move in this position. That is to attach beside white. This would block all the crazy witchcraft that white can do. Of course, white was able, this is a favorable exchange for white because white can still push here and Atari, so at least white can get that. But of course, there's some other endgame techniques that will lead to an advantage for white. But this move was the only move that could hold the position together for black temporarily. So they call this the exchange of the century. Many professional players have analyzed this game. Before AI came out, there were some of the best, some of the best players who were best with reading. They were reading this exchange locally, and they realized what Go Seigen played was the correct move. So it was very impressive, actually. And this position has been studied by many professionals. So very famous exchange. Turns out to be just perfect. It was a perfect exchange. And given how important this game was, having an exchange of Tetsuji like this in the middle of the board made this game definitely the game of the century.
Guys, it's not over. It's not over. First, let me know what you think of my list. Comment below in the description. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. I saw the most motivational video in my life yesterday, and I have to share it with you as an ending. Please enjoy.
Stay fly, hustle through the sky, moonwalk on clouds, stack it up, cheddar, feeling better, proud, mind sharp, cutting through vibes, samurai sword, dropping bars, hit like a freight train aboard. Cities like reflect dreams, mirrored ambition, chasing glory in the chaos, no permission. Quick wit, sharp tongue, arrows in the dark, navigating life, playing like a park. Buster rhymes taking over, no one can ignore. From the alleyways to the grand concert hall floor, putting pieces together, call it life's jigsaw. Rise from the ashes, Phoenix never withdraw. Cold nights.